V'ha'einu b'sayrasecha v'daladei d'meinu b'mitzvaysecha Eyachei nevrameinu liyahava yirah shemecha v'ha'einu b'sayrasecha Daladei d'meinu b'mitzvaysecha v'eyachei nevrameinu Yirah shemecha v'lai leibayish v'lai nikavaleim v'lai nikashay v'lai yilam lahem v'lai leibayish v'lai nikavaleim v'lai nikashay v'lai yilam Okay, so we got to page 96, 97. Right.
I think we went further than
Well, yeah, I know. We got to 98. True. I'm just going to review a little bit. So these are teachings that Reb Shlomo gave at weddings. And in case anybody is tuning in for the first time, so the reason we're studying this now is because Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, is described as is portrayed as a wedding between God and Israel. And so at the chuppah, according to some customs, right after the Kiddushin, they break the cup. According to some customs, they break it at the very end of the chuppah, before the chos and kala go to the cheder yichud. And Reb Shlomo was giving some teachings about the secrets of, or the deeper meanings of the breaking of the glass. So the first one was on page 96. The first thing was about Gevura. He made a distinction between Koyach and Gevura. Koyach is strength, and Gevura is power. And it's not a matter of seeing, are you strong enough to break the glass? On the contrary, anybody could break something, right? The kavanah behind it is that in other words, he's pointing out to the chosin that koyach, strength, is an ability to destroy things, but gevura is the ability to build things. Like it says, Ata gibor l'olam Hashem, the ability to revive someone, to give life to someone. That's the real power of God, right? So he's saying to Yosef, he's saying to the chosin over here, you only need a little bit of koyach to break the glass, but I want you to break the glass not with koyach, but rather with gevura. I want you to have to tune into that sense of power, to the ability to restore things. And then the second teaching was that he says to the chosin that when you're breaking the glass, it's like, I want you to promise your wife that when you're going to be sad, I'm gonna build you back up. I'm gonna give you life. And both of you are promising your children that when you're going to be crying, and if you're sad, we're going to make you feel good. And then the third teaching on page 97 by Gimel, he said that another idea behind the breaking of the glass is the glass is a kli, it's a vessel, right? And sometimes we get stuck on our vessels. In other words, we think that we can only do so much. So sometimes you need to break the glass, so to speak. In other words, that to know that don't let the size of the vessel restrict you, right? It's like I once heard that in, I think it's in Japanese, the word for challenge and crisis is the same word. Chinese? It's all Greek to me.
Crisis and what words did you use?
Either opportunity or crisis and opportunity. So the idea is that that sometimes it's only when you're in a crisis that you realize that you have all these extra strengths, that you have all these extra abilities. So that's another idea that he put forth. And then everybody knows that we break the glass under the chuppah in order to remember the destruction of the temple. So Reb Shlomo says that you only begin to understand the destruction of the temple now that you're building your home. If you don't have a home, you don't really understand what it means that it's been destroyed, right? Okay. So let's go to page 98. Shavriruto shel rega. The breaking that can take place in one moment. Ka'et agid lachem dvar Torah mikol hatzadikim. Now I want to tell you something in the name of all the righteous masters. Kama zman lokeach lishבור kos? How long does it take to break a glass? Maka achat. It just takes one bang. Kama zman lokeach lachriv et Beit HaMikdash? How long does it take to destroy the temple? Psiya achat she'eina b'mkoma, one wrong step. Kama zman lokeach laharos nisuim? How long does it take to break a marriage? Kam psiya achat bilvad she'eina b'mkoma? Also, just one step that's not in this right place. Rega echad shelo yichpat lecha mimcha. One moment that you just don't care about it. Rega echad shelo yichpat lecha mimeno. Rega echad shebo atem lo ahavim zeh zeh. Just one moment where you don't care about each other, or one moment where you don't love each other, is enough to break things. So, Reb Shlomo says to the Chosin and the Kali, he says, please tell me, תאמרו לי, אנחנו אוהבים זה 365 ימים בשנה. We love each other 365 days a year. רק במשך כמה שעות אנחנו לא אוהבים זה. Just a few hours in the year that we don't love each other. So he says, you might tell me something like that, right? He says, לא, זה לא עובד ככה, it doesn't work that way. דרכה אחת יכולה להרוס את כל הנישואים. One bad minute can ruin the whole marriage. לכן אנו מזכירים לכם את בית המקדש. So we're reminding you of the destruction of the temple to know that it also, this huge temple of the home of Hashem's house in this world was destroyed because of one bad moment. Now the truth is that Hashem is patient. That Hashem tolerated our iniquities for a long time, but the destruction, like if you take a look at it and you say, well, when did it actually get destroyed? So physically it got destroyed after much time, right? But when did it already break down? Right? It just takes one moment.
Although, I guess I would, particularly when you're relating see it in the Torah, too, in the husband and wife, that I think the teaching should be that there could be times when you think something happens to sever the relationship, but you can repair it just like we don't always observe it and we're able to make teshuva.
Right. That's
and
also
the problem
true.
is that too many people, one thing happens and it severs the relationship.
That's a very good point.
But it's harder to repair than it is to destroy. Destroy, you said.
Yeah, but
to repair it, you take a life.
But for example, the sin of the golden calf, the sin of the spies, right? We're still paying for it. In other words, the damage
is deep, is long and deep, but we could still.
Right. So that's true. That's true. So what Shlomo's telling the Chosin and the Kala is that, see, sometimes what do we do when we do some kind of a silly transgression in a relationship? We sort of like pretend that these 5 minutes are not going to make a difference, but they do. Right, but don't think. In other words, don't. What he's saying to them is, he says, don't think that. Don't make that mistake of thinking that it's nothing. It's just a small thing. You understand? The person, you who needs to forgive should not think that way. But the person who needs to forgive should think, well, they just made a mistake. It was just a momentary thing, and so on. But on the other hand, the person who's doing the act that's destructive needs to realize that you can't just, so to speak, there are no bubbles, so to speak. There are no protective bubbles that you can go into a bubble and do whatever you want and then come out of it and everything is just as it was before. Not quite.
Not to digest, but the whole Sokha story was very deep for me. But even that, it was like, so the woman should not have been with this man after the husband said you shouldn't be there. But then when she's found that she hadn't really gone the whole way,
she's blessed with children.
Blessed with a child. So,
right.
So that's an example of when someone really transgressed, but then ended up sweetening it.
No. That only worked if she actually hadn't transgressed.
Well, did she transgress by being with this man secluded after the husband told her not to be?
No, but his suspicion was that
she didn't have
that she had relations with him. Right.
It wasn't transgression. So if I was married and I asked my wife not to be with this person and she was, that could be a big
the rabbis,
relationship.
Yeah. So that's why in the Talmud, the rabbis say that be careful, don't put yourself in that position. Yeah.
Wasn't that Hannah's tefillah to God?
Hannah, when she was praying for her child, she threatened God and she said, if you don't give me a child, I'll go and be with somebody and I'll make my husband suspicious, and then he'll bring me to the Beit HaMikdash and I'll have to drink the water and you'll have to give me a child.
I don't think any other religion can be talked about that way.
See, and you're wondering why Jewish men are scared of their wives. Even God is afraid of them.
I don't wonder
Okay, mutar litot. You're allowed to make a mistake. So he says, Vod davar amok, another deep thing. Yosef v'Sarah, those are the Chosin Mekala that he's talking to. Ma yikra kisheta'asu ta'ud b'nisu'eichem. What will happen when you make a mistake in your marriage? Anachnu harei b'nei adam. After all, we're just people. Imken Yosef, ma ta'aseh kisheta'arat ta'aseh ta'ud. So Yosef, what are you going to do when if your wife makes a mistake? I'll tell you what to do. Titzak Mazel Tov. Scream Mazel Tov. Tagid, Eze Yofi Ribono Shel Olam. It's so beautiful, God. Sheyesh li isha yafa, that I've got this beautiful wife. Shelo zo bilvad shehi kol kach tova. Not only is she so good, he gam to'a lifamim. She's so beautiful that sometimes she even makes a mistake. Gewalt ezu zchut. What a merit. I'm sure that everybody at the wedding started to laugh at that point. Harei im hi lo hayta to'a miolam. If she would never make a mistake, hi lo hayta bat adam, then she wouldn't be human. V'chi ata rotze liot nasui l'isha mehachalal. Do you want to marry a woman from outer space? Ella. Halal is space. Yeah. Empty space, the void. So the Ella im ata holech l'schatim kol hazman, ואני מקווה שלא. Maybe if you go to movies, you might be wanting to marry someone from outer space, but I hope that you don't go, that you're not doing that. Sarah, מה תעשי כשיוסף יטעה? Sarah, what are you going to do when Yosef makes a mistake? מה תעשי כשהוא יעשה את הטעות הגדולה ביותר בחייו? What are you going to do when he makes the greatest mistake of his life? תאמרי, so you should say, page 99, יוסף, אני כל כך שמחה שאתה עושה טעויות, אני כל כך שמחה שאתה שובר כוסות. I'm so happy that you make mistakes, I'm so happy that you break glasses. You can just imagine. Anyway, so again, פעם אחד מהילדים של הדוד שלי משך את מפת השולחן, וכל הכלים נשברו. Once one of my uncle's children pulled the tablecloths off the table and everything on the table got broken. דודתי רצתה להכות אותו. My aunt wanted to hit him. דודי אמר, so my uncle said, רגע, את רוצה לכעוס? He says, 1 minute, you want to be angry? So he says, okay. אבל תני לי לפני כן הזדמנות. תני לי קודם לנשק אותו. First let me kiss my child. הוא ניגש לילד ואמר, he went over to the child and he said, אני כל כך שמח שאתה כל כך חזק. I'm so happy that you're so strong. עד שיש ביכולתך לשבור את כל הכוסות, that you're so strong you were able to break all the glasses. איזה יהודי גוואלד. רק בן 3, what a Jew, you're only 3 years old, וכבר יש לך כוח לשבור את כל הכלים. And you're already strong enough to break everything.
I don't know any parents.
Wait. He says, אולי דודי הגזים. Maybe my uncle was exaggerating a little bit, but that's what, אבל כך הוא נהג, that's what he used to do. So Reb Shlomo says, לכן כשתעשו טעויות, when you make mistakes, זכרו אותו, remember my uncle. Okay, remember my uncle, remember that you can focus on the negative and you can focus on the positive. You can focus on the negative and say, you're so bad. You can focus on the positive and say, yeah, you did something and you used your energy and you're so strong, but now please use your energy in the right way. Okay? It's like, for example, sometimes husband and wife, chassan kala, friends, get into an argument because one says something to the other, a word of criticism, and criticism is a powerful thing, right? Like, in other words, it's a different form of exerting power. So you can say to the person, like, I appreciate that you have the ability to criticize, right? But can you please tell me what you want to tell me in a more positive way? You want me to hear it, right? You want me to hear what you're saying. But when you say it in this particular way, it makes it difficult for me to appreciate what you're saying. It makes me not want to listen. So tell it to me in a more positive way, right? So Reb Shlomo is revealing over here is that, so we know the basic reason for the breaking of the glass at the chuppah, to remember the destruction of the temple, right? What he's doing is he's saying that, think about it. There's so much to learn from the breaking of the glass, and one of the things to learn is what are you going to do when something is broken? How are you going to handle it? Think about it. Think about when your husband makes a mistake. How are you going to handle it? Or when your wife makes a mistake, how are you going to handle it? Are you going to use your koyach and destroy even more, or are you going to use your gevura and make something positive out of it? And the same goes for your own self, right? What happens? I told you this once. I once met the Nikolsberger Rebbe in Muncie. A friend of mine took me to see him, and he said to me, we were having a little conversation. He was friends with Reb Shlomo Karlbach. The first time I actually had met him was when Reb Shlomo was sitting shiva for his brother Eli Chaim. So he says to me that in the evening prayer, we say, "V'haseh Satan milfanenu me'acharenu," remove the Satan from in front of us and from behind us. So he says this applies to both when you're doing the mitzvah, to when you did a sin and also to when you did a mitzvah. When it comes to doing a mitzvah, the Satan comes to you and he says, "Oh, this is such an important mitzvah. Like, are you really on the level to do this mitzvah?" Right? The Satan says, "Like, this is a mitzvah for really holy people. Like, what are you doing here?" So remove the Satan in front of us. So you go ahead and you do the mitzvah, then comes the Satan and he says, "Wow, you are so holy. You're so holy, like you did such a mitzvah." So now he tries to get you with being with ga'ava, with being haughty, right? He says, "Oh, you're just amazing," right? And then when it comes to transgression, so in front of us, the Satan says, "Come on, I got this really amazing transgressions for you to do. You'll have a good time." And then sometimes we give in and we do it, and then afterwards comes the Satan and he says, "You see, you're really quite corrupt. Don't even try to do tshuva. You've already tried so many times, and every time that you've tried, you keep on crashing back down." So we pray that remove the Satan after the transgression just as much as we want him not to be there before the transgression. And the same thing, so the same thing that we do with another person when they do something that is destructive, or if we tend to to make it even worse by focusing on the negativity instead of focusing on the possibility of repairing. The same thing we do with our own selves, right? So yes, I did something wrong. Now, that already happened, right? But the negative effects and how long they're going to last and how much more damage they're going to do inside me is a decision that I need to be making right now, right? The insult that I gave to someone, that already happened, right? But to walk around and to say I'm such a terrible person, look at what I did, to keep on thinking in a negative way, that's causing more damage now, right? And so that's why we always have to focus on the positive, right?
So if someone did something wrong and they feel bad about it,
Mm-hmm.
what's wrong with that?
So you're talking about guilt, right?
Person that's covered?
No. Charata is regret. Feeling guilty is if it motivates you in a positive direction, and you do something positive, so then it's okay to feel guilty. But guilt that just makes you feel worse and doesn't motivate you to make a positive change, that's not kosher guilt. It's not kosher guilt.
It should be proportional.
Huh?
The whole thing is about proportion. That it's not, just like we talk about the fact of the Satan before you and after you, that you shouldn't be too horny when you're thinking that it shouldn't go beyond a certain point. So it's, for me, in my own personal life, I see this as being proportional about things, not letting things get overdone, being guilty and feeling where it leads you to other things, it could lead you in a downward spiral.
Right.
Or the other way, in the opposite sense, with the fact of being the opposite of being humble, of being haughty in that sense, that it shouldn't go out of proportion in that way. So it's a matter of proportion.
Okay, true, but all I'm saying is that to regret the negative thing that I've done, that's part of tshuva.
Right. No, it's positive.
But to walk around and to say that I'm so terrible because after all I did this, so now I'm causing myself further damage. That's the Satan after the sin.
Yeah. That it shouldn't be taken out of proportion. It
Yeah.
shouldn't go further than you need.
Okay, that's what you mean.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay, gotcha. Right. You mean out of place.
Right.
Okay? Now look at this. He says, "V'davar chashuv nosaf." And here's another additional important point. Man nomar leborei olam. What are we going to say to the creator of the world? Ribono shel olam, master of the world. Lama hechafta beit hamikdash. Why did you destroy the temple? V'chi biglal shetayinu, is it because we made a mistake? Ve'ei oti v'et ishti, look at me and my wife. אנחנו עושים טעויות כל הזמן. We're making mistakes all the time. ואנחנו עדיין אוהבים זה את זה, we still love one another. כך גם אתה רחם עלינו. So Hashem, you too, we want you to have compassion on us in the same way. In other words, so what Reb Shlomo is, he did something very interesting now. He's saying that, in your home, this is also chutzpah, it's like saying to Hashem, look Hashem, we're modeling forgiveness, right? So we want you to forgive us also. And we learned, well, if you read the parasha sheet, the Baal Shem Tov always, when he spoke, he when he would be arousing the people to do tshuva, he used to quote the verse in Tehillim where it says, Hashem tzilcha, Hashem is your shadow. Just like a shadow moves exactly the way you move, right? Your shadow follows you perfectly. So he says that God is your shadow, meaning to say that one explanation is Hashem is your shade, Hashem protects you, but Hashem is your shadow, meaning to say that Hashem responds to you in the way we relate to Him, right? You relate to Him in a positive way. Hashem responds in that way. Hashem, you relate. You say Hashem like please, I don't want you to see me. So then Hashem doesn't look at you. Whatever it is, God is your shadow. Okay. So if when Hashem sees that you're tolerant of people's mistakes, that you forgive people when they make a mistake, so then Hashem is tolerant with you too, right? But if you are, if you're behaving in such a way that every time that somebody does something wrong, you have no tolerance for them, so then why should I expect God to have? Why should I expect Hashem to be tolerant with me? Right? So he's saying to the Chosin and the Kala, if you can live in such a way that you focus on the good, even when mistakes are made, and you focus on the positive, then you have the right to say to God, you know, we're forgiving each other, so then Hashem, please forgive us as well. Zot Tanach Hazakah. That's a strong argument to God. Zot Tanach Hazakah biyoter leborei kol ha'olamim. That's the strongest argument you can make to the Creator. When you want Him to forgive, if you say, look, I forgive, so then you should forgive us too. So Yosef v'Sara, anu mevarchim etchem shetiyu hazug ha'ohev biyoter ba'olam. We bless you to be the most in love couple in the world. And then ha'alicha l'cheder yichud, the going to the cheder of yichud where the chosn and the kala are alone. She says, "Ka'et ha'chatan v'kala tzrichim liyot levad." Now the chosn and kala have to be alone. Ana tzaru shvil ben shamayim va'aretz ba'avoram. Make a path between heaven and earth for them. Kedei sheyichlu lalechet lecheder yichud v'atem ha'edim lechu achareihem. אנחנו מברכים אותם שכל פסיעה בחייהם הם ילכו יחד תמיד. So we're blessing the chosn and the kala that every step along the way, they should always be walking together. Shalom. Here's a book. I had a thought and I lost it. 1 second. Okay, maybe it'll come back. Okay, now we go to the next writing. This is Yitzchak and Sipporah, page 102. Maybe if we sing a little, you're going to remember. Okay, so I'm not recalling the thought that I had, but another one came to mind. It says at the end of the creation, it says, God saw everything that He did, He made Tov Ma'od, and behold, it was very good. We probably mentioned this once in the past. So the Medrash says, what was very good? At that point, God created the Malach HaMoves, the angel of death. What's so good about that? Right? So Reb Shlomo explained, the angel of death doesn't mean that one-time visit before we leave to the next world. Angel of death means, he says, things die 100 times a day, you know? Relationships die many times a day. What's good about that? What's good about it is that every time that it goes every time that it's not good, It's an opportunity to make it better. Right? It's like yesterday after Havdalah, there was this somebody was talking with me, was saying that the things that motivated him to practice Yiddishkeit, and for the last 2 years are not motivating him anymore. So, as I said, it just means that you got to find it deeper. You got to find it even more deeply inside yourself, right? And that's the way it is. It's like, can you imagine Reb Levi Yitzchak was doing tshuva every single day of his life? All the tzaddikim are doing tshuva all the time. It's not like, I realized because of various situations and various reasons, I realized that I need to do tshuva. So you go ahead and you do tshuva, right? But then, what about tomorrow? Is there no more room for improvement? There's still room for improvement, right? There's still, and then maybe the motivation that motivated you to do this good thing today or to do your tshuva today, maybe you don't have the same motivation tomorrow, right? Like the guy was a poor man, and he's thinking to himself, my gosh, I'm so far from God. Maybe I should be closer to God, and my life will be better. And he goes and he davens mincha, and then he goes and he buys a lottery ticket, and he wins the lottery, and now he doesn't need God anymore. He still needs him, right? But now he doesn't have the same motivation. Now he has money. He's no longer motivated by the lack of something, right? So every time that something breaks, every time that something goes, when something goes wrong, right? That's angel of death. It's like saying, whatever you had until now, it was okay until now, but that no longer exists, right? So what's good about it? What's tov ma'od? What's very good about it? What's very good about it is that it gives you an opportunity to make it even better. Okay. So let's go to page 102. So we're starting another wedding. Okay. There's a couple more weddings coming up. There's a fourth one, and this is the fourth one, and then there's a fifth one also. Okay. 102. I think I once told you that Reb Aryeh told us that when somebody would come to the Vilna Gaon and wanted to study in his yeshiva, he'd say to him, okay, here, take a Gemara and sit down and prepare this passage, go over this page of Gemara. At some point I'll call you and we'll discuss it. And obviously whoever came to study by the Vilna Gaon was already a big scholar to begin with, right? So the person would sit down and read the passage, and maybe again and again. And really, what the Vilna Gaon was actually doing is he was observing to see, are you continuing to read it? Are you continuing to find, in other words, are you just reading it 2-3 times and then say, oh, now I know it, I'm ready to discuss it? Or are you going deeper and deeper each time? And are you looking to go deeper each time? That was actually, before even talking to the person, that was already the admission test. What's your attitude in your learning? Is your attitude in your learning that you can go deeper and deeper and deeper? Or is your attitude in your learning, oh, okay, I've learned this, I know this, I don't have anything more to learn, right? So the tov ma'od is that every time that something breaks down, And breakdown doesn't necessarily mean that something negative actually happened, but even just getting into the habitual, in other words, that it's just where it's no longer like, like the first time you made breakfast for your wife or for your husband, or it's like, wow, like, I'm so happy to make breakfast for for the person that I love. But then when it starts becoming like, ho hum, this is what I do, like I make breakfast, type of thing, and there's no longer any excitement in it. Well, that's already Malach HaMavis. The Malach HaMavis is already there. Understand? You know the story about this Karlin or Chassid. Karlin, there's two branches of Karlin. There's Karlin Pinsk and there's Karlin Stalin. Yom Tov Glazer is a Chassid by Karlin Pinsk. Now, one of the Karlin Stalin, they are screamers. When they daven, you could be a block away and you can daven with the minyan because they scream every word out loud. Literally, they use all their energy. Baruch Ato! Like it's like every word is out loud with a lot of energy. So the story goes, and I heard it from Reb Shlomo, that this Karliner Chassid, a poor schlepper guy, so he had a little shack, and across the field from this wealthy individual in town, the guy who owned the factory that everybody was working at, that everybody was making a living from. And this guy was like a sad guy, was an angry guy, he was an intolerant person, and everything had to be just so exact and so on. And what do sad people hate the most? What is it that bothers them the most? Joy. Happy people. They can't stand somebody, if they're happy. Now, all year long, he didn't like this chassid, because this chassid was always happy. But especially on Sukkot, because on Sukkot he's sitting and eating his meal outside in the sukkah, and across the field is this Karliner chassid with his rickety sukkah, and the Karliner chassid is singing, joyously and everything, and he couldn't take it. So he found out that this guy is so poor. How does he actually make a sukkah? Where does he get the material from? He goes around after everybody finishes making their sukkahs. He always had like an extra piece of wood, an extra this, and an extra that. They would slap together a little broken board over here, another piece of wood over here, and he latched together a sukkah. So this rich guy puts out the word in town that no one should dare give this guy anything for building his sukkah. He finds out that any one of his employees gave this guy even so much as a broken board, he's going to be fired. Anyway, the Karliner chassid is walking around town and do you have any wood left over? Do you have any wood left over? And everybody's saying, I'm so sorry, I used everything this year. And mamish, like it's already getting darkest the night before Sukkot, and the rich guy goes out to his backyard. His sukkah is standing, it's beautiful, and he looks across the field, and the Karliner chassid doesn't have his sukkah yet. So he feels, good, I'm going to have a nice peaceful Sukkot this year. I'm not going to have to listen to this guy singing. So comes the night of Sukkot, he goes into his sukkah, makes kiddush, he washes, he's having his meal, and it was dark, so he didn't see across the field, and all of a sudden he hears the Karliner chassid singing, right? He's singing joyously. The guy goes out, he sees, my gosh, he has a sukkah, and he loses all self-control, and he runs across the field, and he runs into the Karliner sukkah. He says, where'd you get the wood? The chassid says, oh, Shalom Aleichem, after all these years, you finally came into my sukkah, like sacred Yom Tov, where you coming in, where'd you get the wood? I'm not interested. He says, I'll tell you, but just please sit down, have a seat, it's Yom Tov, relax. So he says, I don't, just tell me where you got the wood. He says, okay, say good job. Good job, where'd you get the wood? So he says, I'll tell you the truth. Every year I go around and I schlep together broken pieces of wood that I get from different people. And strangely, this year, nobody had any wood left over to give me. And I'm walking around in the streets, I'm looking through the garbage last night, and I can't find any wood. It's already 2 o'clock in the morning, I can't find any wood. And guess what happens? Guess who I met? Who? I met the angel of death. I said, Malach HaMoros, Shalom Aleichem, what are you doing in town? So he says, I have one more pickup to do tonight. So I said, really? Here in my town? He says, yeah. I said, who? I'm not going to believe this. He said, your name. I said, him? You're coming to get him? Don't waste your time. He's dead already. He's such an unhappy guy. He's not alive. The angel of death says, really? I said, yeah, I'm telling you, everybody knows that. So I said, thank you so much, the angel of death says. I'm so tired, I have such a busy day. So I'm glad that you told me this. So I said, and the angel of death started leaving. So I said, wait a minute, Malach HaMoros, I did you a favor, I need a favor also. So he says, what do you need? He says, I need wood for the sukkah. So he says, well, according to my itinerary, I don't think I'm coming back to this town for at least a week or two after Sukkot. So he says, by the cemetery where they do the tahara, where they purify the body and they prepare the body for the burial. So there's all these pieces of wood that they put in, until you put up a monument, you put a stake into the ground, and it says on it Pei Nun, which stands for Po Nitman, here lies buried. Since I'm not coming back till after Sukkot, there's a lot of wood there. You can go use it for the Sukkot, and then after Sukkot, put it back. He says, look at my Sukkot. Po Nitman, all these. With that, he broke the guy's sadness. Understand? So, understand? The Gemara says, we learned this in the Tanya Shir also a few months back. The Gemara says that Kashem Shemavachin al Hatov Kach Mevachin al Lavan. Just like we bless God for the good, we also bless Him for the bad. So, and Kashem means just like. In other words, that means to say that's why when we hear that somebody passed away, we make a bracha, we say Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. And the mourners at the funeral, before they tear kriya, they actually say, or when they tear kriya, they actually say the full bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam. So the fact of the matter is that we're human. It's very, very difficult to do that. For someone to make a blessing like that, it's a very difficult thing. And the question is asked, what do you mean exactly like? Anyway, the story is that there was this Rosh Hashiva, his name was Reb Meisel's I don't know how many years ago, back in Europe. And he had a lumber business as well, so he didn't take. He was a Rosh Hashiva. He made his living from the lumber business. The way the lumber business worked was that you would cut the trees, basically you bought rights from the government or from the poorets to cut the trees in a certain part of the land, and you would do that in winter time. So then that you can pull the trees over the snow. You can pull the trees to the riverbed, which was frozen, and then in spring the riverbed would defrost, and it would flow down to towards the ocean or towards the larger space. And if things went well, you made a lot of money. But if the current was too strong and you couldn't control the logs and you washed out to sea, you lost everything. So one year, Rabbi Meisels is an elderly person already, and there was a big loss. And the family had to let him know. And they were afraid. They were concerned about it, how he's going to take the news. So they went to his top student and they said, "Can you figure out some way to break the news to him so that he doesn't go into shock and die?" So he takes out the Gemara and he goes over to the Rosh Hashiva and he says, "Rabbi, can you explain this passage to me? In the same way that you make a blessing over the good, you make a blessing over the bad." So he says, "Well, it means exactly what it says." So he says, "Well, when something good happens, I'm happy, I dance. You mean to say if I hear bad news, I have to be so happy and dance and do things in that way?" So he says, "Okay, well, let's look at the commentaries." So they looked at the commentaries. The commentary says Kashem means just exactly the same way. So he says, "Rebbe, start dancing." And he fainted. And they revived him. He says, "I guess I don't understand it either." Understand? So it's not an easy lesson to learn that when something negative happens, it's not an easy lesson to learn to look at the positive, to see the positive in it. But that's the way it is. That's what we need to do. You understand? That's the avodah, both in other people and also in ourselves. So that's why Reb Nachman's whole teaching of Azamra focus on the positive points. Look at the Nekudat Tovah. You always have to look at the Nekudat Tovah, because then you go into a positive space. If you're not in a positive space, you can't do it. Okay. So, since this week's Parsha is Parshat Ba'alotcha, and it's talking to Aaron HaKohen about when he lights the menorah, we're going to look at it tomorrow. Maybe we're going to look at a different sefer from Reb Shlomo about the way Aaron, the whole thing of Aaron HaKohen lighting the menorah. But I want to share one more thing yesterday's Parsha we read Birkat Kohanim. So I saw this in the Kedushat Levi. So the Kedushat Levi says like this, the Berditchever. It says in the Torah, it says, "V'samu et shmi al bnei Yisrael, they shall place my name upon the children of Israel, v'ani avarachem, and I will bless them." Right? So the question is asked, so who is blessing us? When the Kohanim are going up and doing Birkat Kohanim, they're doing the priestly blessing, who is giving the bracha? Is it the Kohanim that are giving the bracha, or is it God? Right? So, on the one hand, the Kohanim are saying, it says, "Ko tivarachu b'nei Yisrael," this is how you should bless the children of Israel, right? The mitzvah is that the Kohanim are to bless them. But then it says, "V'ani avarachem," I'm going to be the one blessing them, right? So who's giving the blessing? So the Berditchever says, he says that, what does it mean? They shall place my name on the children of Israel. What does that mean? Okay. What does that mean that they should place my name upon the children of Israel? So, and this is my understanding of those few lines, so I hope I'm understanding it correctly. So he says that what the Kohanim are doing is that they have to say the blessing out loud. You can't just think it. And it has to be done in such a way that when they're saying the blessing, Yivarechecha Hashem, God should bless you, Ya'ir Hashem Panav, etc., they should bring the presence of God to the people. They should do the blessing in such a way so that nobody should feel that they're alienated from God. Nobody should feel that God is distant from them. That's the role. The blessing itself is Hashem giving the blessing. But you put my name upon the people, meaning to say, bring me into their presence. You understand what you understand? There's something very deep over here, right? I can talk to you about God, and I can give a shir and chassidut and philosophy and so on. It doesn't mean that I'm making you feel that God is close to you. You can talk to me about God. It doesn't mean that I'm going to feel that God is really, really close by, right? But but there's a way to do it where the person feels that God really is close to me. God is really here. I thought that I'm millions of miles away from Him because of whatever I've done in my past, whatever it is. And the Kohen is blessing the people and making them aware. Hashem is right here. Hashem is present for you. Open up to it. Be here. So now for tomorrow morning, you have a new kavanah. Our local Kohen. Okay? And how does it connect with what we're learning? Because when you can manage to do that, then the person feels that they can actually fix and improve and do something positive, right? But if they feel that, oh, you're so terrible, you've done this, you're so far, you'll never get back, so the person doesn't stand the chance, right? So you know that the Shavuos is the yahrzeit of David HaMelech and the Baal Shem Tov also. Right? That was the one way of presenting like what was it that the Baal Shem Tov accomplished, is he made everybody realize how close God is. The story I told yesterday at Shavuot is about Shlomo going to the army base. Remember the story that I mentioned yesterday? Going to the army base and he asks the rabbi of the base. He says, what's going on here? Like, what are you doing? And I want to know if you're learning Torah with the chayalim. And the rabbi says, these guys aren't interested. And Shlomo bet the guy, and he went over to a group of soldiers and he said, you want to learn the sweetest Torah for 5 minutes? Was it the words that he spoke to them, that's what made the difference? No. I'm sure he said beautiful things, but it was the feeling that they got when they were learning with him. Right? It's the feeling that we get when we're learning with Shlomo's teachings as well, even today. Right? You get a sense of not just like I can relate to this, it feels close to my heart. Okay. And that's the second blessing of the Birkat Kohanim, Ya'er Hashem Panav Elecha V'Chuneka. Right? So that blessing is about study of Torah. But what is V'Chuneka? God should give you charm. God should give you grace. Meaning to say that the Torah that you're learning, it should be beautiful. It should, and when you're learning with other people, it should be beautiful. It should be something that they feel like, wow, this is so special. Okay, so we'll join the next wedding tomorrow.